We're back again with another AD&D Toolkit tutorial video. This one's going to be focused on the Magic-User classes, the Magic-User and its subclass, the Illusionist. They are quite similar up until the point that you start discussing their different spell libraries for the most part. So we're going to handle them kind of in tandem, mostly at the same time. And yeah, we'll just go from there. So to start out, we're going to open up the player's handbook here. And I want to take a quick look at the ability of intelligence before we get into the class proper. And the reason being for this is really by far the only ability that magic users are concerned about is intelligence. Of course, everybody would love constitution and dex and strength and so forth, but intelligence is of utmost importance. They have to have very high intelligence. The only class that I would say maybe comes in a close second for like really needing to prioritize their primary ability would be the cleric, who really wants wisdom. But even with those guys, you know, the fighting abilities are important too, because they can be very defensive. They can engage in combat regularly. But the magic users, it's all about intelligence. Anything else is a bonus, but they got to have high intelligence. And we're going to get into a few of the reasons why here. So a mage character or magic user, they need a minimum intelligence of 9, and they actually need a minimum of dexterity of 6. And I guess that's to be able to do the hand motions and so forth and get all of those somatic movements in their proper order and to enact them properly. You can't be a complete klutz and be a magic user. Whereas the illusionists are quite a bit more difficult to qualify for. They need a minimum of 15 intelligence as opposed to 9 for the magic user. And the illusionist needs a minimum of 16 dexterity. They got to be quite dexterous, like on par with a lot of thieves. So that's something you want to keep in mind. But as far as the intelligence goes, this table that you see my little mouse working over here, this pertains only to the magic users and illusionists. And these are your intelligence scores, and then this is the chance to know each spell, minimum number of spells per level, maximum number of levels per spell. And so magic users, well, each of these spellcasting classes, they have usually 12 to like 30 spells per level, depending on the class and the level we're talking about. Like the magic user, level 1, they have 30 spells. And when you get up to level 9, I think it's only like a dozen or so magic user spells. Whereas the illusionist, much more limited in the number per level. I think level 1, they start at like 12 or 15 or something like that. But equally powerful. And some even argue as they level up, they can get even more powerful than the primary magic user. So the point of this intelligence table is, if we were to go, and let me see, I think I want to find the initial spell pages. So let's say here for the magic user. So yeah, magic user starts with 30 in the first level. The illusionist does start with a dozen, and you can see the illusionist has a lot fewer spells per level in these higher levels. There's only 8 or 6. And they only go up to 7th level spells, whereas the mage, even at level 9, which nobody really ever attains, people just don't play that deep into the game, they have a dozen already, still at level 9. So a lot more volume of spells for the magic user. And how this works is, it's extremely rare that you're going to ever probably find all spells of one level. But even if you were to, your intelligence dictates how many per level you can learn. So I wanted you to take a look here at the library of these spells. Now we're going to go back to this intelligence page. And so for that list of 30 spells that we had at level 1 for the magic user, if their intelligence is, say, a 15, so they fall in this row here, they only have a 65% chance of knowing each of those 30 spells. Which means when they come across one, because magic users and illusionists acquire new spells from scrolls they find, or if they happen upon a spellbook they can transcribe from, that's a gold mine. But out of those 30 spells, again, only a 65% chance based on this intelligence that they can even learn it. And so what they'll do is roll the percentile dice. If they roll a 65 or less, they can learn a spell. Say they find Magic Missile. They'll roll those percentile dice. If they roll a 60, they can learn Magic Missile. If they roll a 70, they fail to learn Magic Missile. And because of their intelligence, they can never even try again. You get one shot at it, and that's it for a lifetime. So even if you come across other scrolls with Magic Missile or spell books, you can possibly transcribe that spell into your spellbook, but you cannot cast it, ever. So this percentile right here alone is a great reason to have high intelligence, because this is everything, right? For a magic user, casting spells. You do not want to have a 55 or 65% chance on missing out on crucial spells. And there certainly are some of those at each level. And how it's supposed to work is you start out like with that list of 30 at level 1. And let's say the same magic user here has a level 15 intelligence. They're going to roll the 65% or the percentile dice 30 times and see which of the level 1 spells they qualify for. They're not going to have all of those spells. They're not going to have access to them yet. We're just figuring out for the level 1 list how many they can even understand based upon their intelligence, and therefore know or learn at some point in the future when they find them. And then when this magic user gains level 2, you go through the level 2 list. You can do it that way. That's how you're supposed to do it. I actually don't go through that list. It's just when my player comes across a scroll or a spell book with a new spell that they want to learn, because they don't have it in their spell book yet, that's when I have them roll individually for that spell. But I don't know, I've never thought or encountered any reason favoring one way or the other. Whatever organizationally works better for your game, I guess you could do. Now, the only caveat to this, where I said before, if they rolled a 70, this magic user, and failed to learn Magic Missile, they can never try again. There is one caveat to that. There's an exception. And that's this minimum number of spells per level. So at 15 intelligence, there is a minimum number of level 1 spells or level 2 spells that they can learn. And it's always 7. So at each level, this intelligence warrants a minimum number of spells at 7. And so if this magic user went through that initial list of 30 first level spells and failed 24 of them, that means they only were able to learn 6. Well, the minimum is 7, so they get to go again. And I'm pretty certain you're supposed to go through the list. Now, I don't remember if you're supposed to go through one at a time, or roll the dice, or let the player choose, or if it matters. And I think the latter, the last one, is the answer. It doesn't really matter how you want to go through that. Up to the DM. Ultimately, I would take your players into account, their opinions. But, so let's say we let the players choose which, order they want to go through that list. And so if they go through the whole list, they fail 24, they've only found 6 they're able to learn, so they haven't met their minimum, they can pick a new one. And then they could say, you know what, I want to give Magic Missile one more shot. Now they'll go through the first level spell list again until they get one more spell that they're qualified to learn, and we've reached that minimum of 7. Similarly, maximum number of spells per level, that's a little easier, I would imagine, to understand. This same magic user could not learn more than 11 first level spells. Once they find 11 they can learn, they max out. So that would be an argument I guess I would make against going in, say, numbered order from starting at level 1 spell at the first spell and working your way down alphabetically. Because if you get your first 11 really quick, you're going to miss out on all the spells at the bottom half of the list for to even try. I don't like that at all. I want to empower my players where I can. That doesn't unbalance the game. So I let them choose. And that's another reason why I let them roll these percentile dice as they find a scroll or a spell book to learn from, because they may find a scroll with, say, Charm Person, and that they don't have Charm Person yet. They haven't tried to learn it yet, but maybe they're not interested in that spell. So they could skip it and just keep going until they find, the spells they do want to learn. So that's the way I run my games. But what's really important, again, is this table. And you will see this score of 19 or more, which if you are new to first edition AD&D, and I probably should have said this at the beginning of the video, but that's what this video is again geared towards, is players who are pretty new to Dungeons & Dragons all in all, and very new to first edition. Trying to give them the basics of understanding. I've been doing a class series here, and I want them to have an understanding of what each class is like, their pitfalls, and the bonuses that you can look forward to, their strengths. So I'm sure if you've watched any of my other videos, you've come across the fact that typically abilities range between 3 and 18. You can exceed 18 at times, particularly with strength, but you can with the other abilities too. And it is possible to get to 19. You're going to find tables in the Deities and Demigods manual that talks about each of these abilities and their bonuses once they exceed 18. So that 19 to 25 range. 25 is the absolute max. The strongest greater gods cap out at 25 and their abilities too. So you don't expect to reach 25 on any of your players. Like I said, that's the strongest of the strong gods that hit 25 in any of these abilities. But you can exceed 18. And like in particular, I think maybe elves can? No, I don't think anybody can naturally, now that I'm thinking about it, as far as races. So the way you would do this is through some magical means, usually. Like, maybe a wish spell could work your way up to 19 intelligence. Maybe some items or something like that. But in any event, it does exist. And once you hit 19, that's the only time you can have a maximum of learning every spell on a level. Though 18 is very high. Going back to that list I showed you a little further down of the list of magic user spells, the first couple of levels have like 30 in them, but then they start to dwindle from there, so 18 is quite a bit. I think anybody would be very happy with 18 maximum spells. Especially the Illusionists, right? They don't even have 18 spells per level. So I think there is nothing else here. I think this is all just what I had talked to you about. This point is important to know. If at any point your intelligence does change, particularly for the worse, you will have to make these checks again. So if somehow, and this can happen, there's curses and things that can, mess with abilities. So let's say this 15 intelligence magic user had their intelligence lowered, particularly if it was a significant lowering. You would need to go through the spell lists again and see what they're now capable of understanding or knowing at that level of intelligence. And they may lose some spells that they had prior been able to cast. They're just not intellectually gifted enough to manage that spell any longer. So do keep that in mind as a DM. And here they talk about acquiring new spells. And I'll also point that out in the DMG. Is a little more description on that there, but generally speaking, magic users and illusionists, they need to acquire new spells, as I had said earlier, from scrolls and spellbooks. The only other way they can learn spells is each time they level up, they can learn one new spell from that new level. So this 15 intelligence magic user I had was a level 1. Once he gets enough XP to hit level 2, he can go through that level 2 list of spells and pick one that he wants to put in his spellbook, and he can cast it now. You would have to roll these percentile dice, of course, to see if you're able to know it. But I tend not to play that way. I ignore that rule. I don't like to just spontaneously give them a spell. I like to be a little liberal with my scrolls in my games, and so that's how they acquire new spells for my characters. Up to each DM, of course, as are most things in first edition. All right, so next I just want to move down to this page, and I point this out each time I've been doing these class-based videos, the tutorials. And it's just important to, races can be fun, especially with the RP value. And a lot of new players come into, at least in my experience, first edition wanting to be something or pretty much anything other than human, just because, we're playing a fantasy game, right? So it's fun. But races and class combinations do matter greatly in first edition. And so you'll see for a magic user here, here's the races along the top. Most races say no, they cannot even be a magic user. Humans can be, half-elves, and elves. That is it. Now these numbers, the 11 for the elf and the 8 for the half-elf, are the level max. So a half-elven magic user can never get above level 8. And you'll see this little 7 superscript there. Half-elven magic users with an intelligence of less than 17, so 16 or less, they're actually capped to 6th level. If they get to intelligence 17, they can now rise to the 7th level. They need an 18 to hit that level 8. Actually, wrong spot here, level 8. So another reason, intelligence, highly important for magic users. So your half-elf can hit 8, your elf can hit 11. Humans are unlimited. They can get up to double digits, 20 and above. So if you're going to be playing a long campaign and you plan on getting into those double-digit levels and continuing to play and building strongholds and affecting, politics and countries and that kind of stuff, you probably have a good argument for playing a human just because you have those unlimited levels. If not, I'm thinking go elf. At least you can make your way to 11 if you have a very high intelligence, 18 to hit 11. You'll see they got the same restrictions on intelligence and level caps. So I just wanted to make sure my players are always aware of that before they choose a race. And as I usually say, you can't go wrong with human. If you're very new to the game and you don't understand the bonuses and the penalties to different races, start with human. It's a great way to go. They're the standard, the gold standard in first edition. Okay. From there, we do want to move down to... There we go. Hit points and hit dice. So magic users and illusionists both roll the d4 at each new level for their HP. Very, very low. Worst in the game. They are terribly squishy. Keep them in the back. Keep them protected. They cannot wear armor, which we're going to get into in a second. They die very easily if they engage in any kind of physical combat. So keep them out of the way as best you can. Make sure they're grouped, I would think, with a couple of tanky type guys. I did see a video, I only watched bits and pieces of it, of a group that went out. I think there was only 3 of them, and they went out with purely magic users. I didn't watch enough to see. I'm going to guess they hired a bunch of henchmen and hirelings up front, because I can't imagine how 3 magic users could do much of anything in first edition on their own like that. But yeah, I generally recommend you need some meat in your party. So they roll the d4. Maximum hit dice you see here is, for instance, a cleric. Once they hit level 9, they stop rolling that d8 for their hit points once they get to level 10. Instead, what they do is, from level 10 on, they just add 2 more hit points to their total. Same for every other class. And so this max tells you at what level they stop rolling dice. So the magic user stops rolling at 11, and from that point forward, I think they only add 1 per level, could be 2, certainly not more than the cleric. An illusionist stops rolling their hit dice, the d4, at level 10. So I guess you would say you get slightly better hit points on average with a magic user at those higher levels, but 1 or 2, not much, nothing significant to be concerned about. Of course, they both have great spell ability, and class has no level limit. Now, this is not the same as the racial level limit. This is the class level limit. There are some classes like the druid no matter what race, no matter what, but anything else, the class is limited to a level 14, and there's actually only one individual in your campaign who can be the Great Druid. For a player to reach level 14, they've got to defeat the existing Great Druid, whether it's a player or NPC, and drop them down a level so that they can therefore rise up. There can only be one level 14. There can only be one. Yeah, a little shout out, a little movie spoiler there. See if anybody can post in the comments where that line comes from. There can only be one. Assassins also can only be one Master of Assassins, and same with monks. They have a level limit. Otherwise, no other class has level limits. So that is pretty much all there is to really say about HD and HP, other than they are the suck for the magic users and illusionists, so keep that in mind. Next table talks about our weapons and armor I was just saying a couple of moments earlier. Magic users and illusionists. Dagger, dart, staff. That is it. No other weapons in the game they can use for first edition. No shields, no armor. So as you can tell, they are not intended to be in physical combat. Keep them out as much as you can, unless it's in a very safe scenario where they're going to go in for a kill shot or something. They can use flasks of oil that they chuck and light on fire. Poison's got the old question mark. So as far as these weapons, most are going to start with a staff. They do 1 to 6 damage. They have a longer range. You really can get them anywhere. It's just a long piece of wood, right? Daggers do have a different type of damage, where these are piercing and staff is bashing, and that might matter depending on what kind of protocols that your DM is using, especially if they're employing like weapon versus armor adjustments, which most DMs don't. But if you use Toolkit, I would advise you do, because we've made it super simple, and that's usually the reason DMs don't, because it's complicated, another complication to add into the game. But when you have the data all available on your character sheet, and this data adjusts as your character's level automatically, so it's super simple to use. It adds some depth and diversity to the game, particularly in choosing weapons and armors, because some weapons do better against certain types of armors than others. And so it's not just damage you're looking for. So in any event, I like the idea of using weapon versus armor adjustments. Not a bad idea. But in any event, only those 3. Dagger does 1 to 4 damage, Dart does 1 to 3, and that's a thrown missile weapon, so up to 30 yards or feet, depending if you're indoors or outdoors. Staff is 1 to 6, and it's bashing, where the dagger and the dart are piercing. The dart is 1 to 3 damage, as I said. The one silver lining, I guess I can say about them, is you can chuck up to 3 in a round. It's the highest rate of fire out of any weapon in the game. So even, I'm going to show you weapon proficiencies at some point here. Magic users start with only 1 weapon, and they can be proficient in or trained in. They get a penalty of -5 on their to-hit rolls if they're not proficient. So you're not going to be hitting often with a weapon you're not proficient in. So let's say you take my advice and you start with the staff. I usually advise new players, grab some darts anyway. They're lightweight, they're extremely cheap. Just chuck them. You can chuck 3. You never know. I had a player the other night hit with 2 out of 3. It can happen. And so you do a little extra damage for your party, you know? So especially at low levels, I would grab some darts. Keep them in the backpack. As you get to higher levels, hopefully you're going to be relying more on your spells and whatnot. Might not even have time to be chucking darts. That is an argument to be made, I guess, for the dagger here, in that since you have to pick only 1 weapon to be proficient in, the dagger can kind of do 2 jobs, right? You can be stabbing with it, or you can chuck it like the dart, same range on it. It does a little more damage, but you can only chuck, I think, 2 daggers as opposed to 3 darts. So if dagger is your primary weapon, you can be pretty proficient at stabbing or throwing it, which is something to keep in mind. Another argument push you towards the staff, in my opinion. is that when it comes to magic weapons, there are more magic staves, and they are way more powerful and appropriate for a magic user or illusionist than a magical dagger would be. You're probably not going to find those magic staves before level 5, depending on how liberal your DM is with magic stuff. So maybe it's not that important to start with. You can grab the staff at level 5 or 6, rather. But yeah, those are your options. That's it. So these guys are not meant to fight hand to hand or ranged weaponry, for that matter. All right, so spells. We're going to get into it. That's what the magic user and the illusionist are all about. That is their everything. Actually, I guess before I get into that, I'll just go over some of these basics and their narratives. So as I said earlier, 9 minimum intelligence, 6 dexterity for the magic user if their intelligence exceeds or actually reaches, I think. Yeah, so if they reach 16, they'll get the benefit of 10% to their XP. Anything else important here that we did not talk about? I don't think so. They can be any alignments. They talk about spell books. They have a great number of magic items they get access to. And like I said, particularly those magic staves. Awesome stuff they have in the DMG. And always a good idea if you can find some protection items for a magic user. Rings, cloaks of protection, that kind of stuff. Beef up the armor class a little bit. Anything that makes them harder to hit or see or anything like that. Great for magic users. And they talk about the strongholds here, so forth. All right, so XP. You might have heard again me say in some of my earlier videos, if you saw some of my class-based videos, that some classes start out really high, trying to level up, like 2,500. I think so 2,501 to reach level 2. I think the only class that's higher than that is the Paladin. They're 2,750, I believe, to reach level 2. So magic users are really hard to start leveling. But as you get to these higher levels, it gets way easier all of a sudden. Like, so I usually tell players, check out level 2, say, right? Level 6 here, and then like level 10 to get a gauge. And so like a magic user, when you're doing a side-by-side comparison, that is. So let's check out a level 10 magic user needs 250,000 XP. Now, a fighter, let's say, reaches level 2 at 2,000, right? Or 2,001, where the mage is 2,500. It's quite a bit harder for the mage. The mage reaches level 10. Oh, I forgot what I said already, but like 150,000. Fighter now jumps up way past the magic user to 500,001 needed for level 10. Huge differential in favor of the magic user now. Oh, 250. So double the XP for the fighter. So this variance can be difficult at some levels and easier at other levels compared to other classes, so you really want to check that out. And when playing a magic user or illusionist, you got to bear that in mind that it's about end game, or at least mid game, for those spellcasters, that they rise in levels slowly. They have no armor. They got such low hit points. So they're not quite as active. They're definitely not as active as other classes early on. And they're very vulnerable. So you're building for this sweet spot, like 5, 6 and up. Once you start getting there, you're going to be leveling quicker. You're going to, your hit points are still going to suck, but you're going to have a spell list you can work with each day that is effective and potent. So that's what you're playing for. So you got to be the kind of player who's able to embrace a little delayed gratification to play one of these spellcaster types. They do it even the very lowest levels. Magic users and illusionists do have a couple each of them. Have a 1 or 2 really freaking awesome nuke spells that at levels 1 and 2, fighting against level 1 and 2 or even lower adversaries. They're tremendous spells that can make or break an adventure. Like they can totally turn the tide of a combat where an encounter where your party's like on the verge of death, and if the magic user can pop off a sleep spell, they can win the day instantaneously. They only get one shot at it per day, so you've got to hold that sucker in reserve for when it's really, really needed. Don't break glass unless it's a case of an emergency. So they can be effective, just rarely at these low levels. So, yeah, do keep that in mind. You're going to be playing more for the mid-game to really enjoy these two classes. The other thing I think I wanted to no, I'm just going to forget that for now. Okay, so magic users. Oh, yes, they go up by 1 hit point. I figured it had to be 1. So 1 hit point per level once they exceed level 11, and the illusionist once they exceed level 10. Okay, then this chart or table is very important. These are the level of spells. If you remember when I was showing you the listing of all the magic user spells, there's 9 levels of spells. This is the level of the magic user. At level 1, you're able to cast 1 level 1 magic user spell per day. That's it. That's what I was saying earlier about that. Like if you had a sleep spell prepped, ready to go, shoot that off. You're done for the day until you can get at least 4 hours of sleep and then some time to memorize a new one. Level 2, you're only getting 2 level 1 spells and so forth. Level 3, you get 2 level 1, 1 level 2, and you can see if the table extrapolates from there. And so, yeah, I was saying like at this mid-range, like when you hit level 5, you can get 4 level 1s, 2 level 2, and you start breaking into that level 3 where you've got the infamous fireball spell and quite a few other really good spells there. So I would say probably level 5 and up. That's where you're really going to start shining as a magic user. And this is the illusionist table here. Very similar. There is a little bit of differentiation. So you do want to just, you got to make sure you use the proper table, but they are very similar. Leveling for the illusionist is a little bit easier. They hit level 2 at 2250 instead of 2500 for the magic user. And if you remember, it was 250, I think, for level, 250 for level 10 on the magic user. 220 for the illusionist. So they level up a little bit more quickly. And then we'll go to the illusionist here. I had mentioned to you earlier, minimum intelligence 15, dex 16. Those are the minimums. So quite a bit harder to qualify for. Really, really difficult to say you couldn't be a magic user if you wanted to be, with 9 and 6 as your minimums. Though I would advise not to be if your intelligence is low. Really, like you want a 15 or above to be either one of these classes in your intelligence, I would say. I'm not as concerned about dexterity, but good thing about this dexterity, it does make it harder to qualify as an illusionist, but if you've got 16, 17, or 18 as an illusionist dexterity, well, intrinsically now you've got a significant armor class bonus. Dexterity 16, I think, gives you 2 to your armor class, 17, 3, 18 would be a 4. Am I overreaching there? Let's double check. Dexterity. No, got it right. All right, so -4 improvement. Yeah, so at 15 is you get your first dex bonus. So at 16, every illusionist is going to have at least a benefit of 2 applied to their armor class. And if you have higher dex, even better. But, so that's the silver lining of having to qualify for a higher dex. You're going to have an improvement to your armor class, which is not a bad thing for any class. Back to our illusionists. Is there anything else we want to talk about with them? So they give a little bit of a subjective narrative here. While being equal or even slightly inferior to the normal magic user in most respects, illusionists have different and highly effective spells to employ. And I wouldn't, slightly is the key word here. They're so similar, as you can see from what we've went through. Like I said, the illusionist stops rolling their hit dice at 10, the magic user 11, but it's a 4-sided die, so what's one more 4-sided die going to do for you? Very, very little. The weapons are the same, armor and requirements or limitations actually the same. They're so similar, I wouldn't even say they're slightly inferior. They're pretty much just equal. But where they really differ is in their spell work. You could even say, you know what? really harping on this point, but because the illusionist has those requirements for dexterity and intelligence that are much higher, I would imagine your average illusionist probably has better ability scores in these two than your average magic user. And so maybe they're slightly superior, you know? But the spells, again, is where they really differ. The illusionist spells are quite different than the magic user ones, and really interesting. Little trickier to adjudicate as a DM, so you want to make sure you're familiar with illusionists and their spells if you can allow them in your campaign, which I hope you do because they are a legitimate class, they're supposed to be. Where was I going with that point? Yes, well, one thing I can tell you is that in Toolkit, the web application I've built for AD&D, there is a Dungeon Master module that handles illusions, particularly the ones of Phantasmal Force and Improved Phantasmal Force, which standardizes how you handle illusions. That can be very helpful to all DMs, but particularly newer ones, or if you're new to working with illusionists. So I would definitely check that out in AD&D Toolkit. But yeah, I guess they're slightly different as far as the classes go, but very different as far as the magic goes. And something to consider also is, if you remember, I said illusionists can only reach level 7 as far as spell levels go. And once they do get those higher levels, they can start learning magic user spells. So like level 1 magic user spells. So that's just something to keep in mind. And I think they even do here say, yeah, they do. As normal magic users and possibly, well, I gotta back up a little bit. If you peruse the number and types of spells usable by illusionists and normal magic users, you'll see that possibly the illusionist spells are slightly more potent than the magic user at higher levels. And yeah, a lot of players I've heard argue that, and I don't know that I would argue against them. So yeah, illusionists can be great. And they do say the power of these illusionists, due to their spells being so powerful, how the authors chose to offset it a bit is the magic user gets a little more accessibility to magic items than the illusionist would. Maybe significantly more. The magic user is the typical archetype of a mage, a wizard, and so they can employ like everything. As far as magical items go, yeah, they can do it all. But I think that might be it I want to do here, other than, again, let's go to the spell lists and we'll just look them over quickly. Magic users have like I said, a much larger library to learn from. Illusion is much smaller, but great spells. Most of these spells are really cool. They also allow for a lot more creativity, I would say, particularly like these Phantasmal Force ones and stuff. Some of them really allow you to express yourself well. Like the way that you can manifest them is almost, or maybe literally unlimited. Because you can make up any kind of phantasm you can dream of it. And then it's just up to the DM to adjudicate whether you pulled off with that illusion, that phantasm that you wanted. Like if you got your intended victims to believe whatever you're trying to, display, manifest there. So yeah, it's boundless what you can try to do with some of these spells, and that can make for a lot of fun. So one thing I did want to do while we're looking at these lists was just give, and again, this is more for people new to AD&D, because I'm going to give advice on what spells I would recommend, because this can be overwhelming to look at, especially as a new player. And you're not going to want to go, or maybe you do, but a lot of people don't want to have to go read all of these right away, particularly if it's in the middle of like gameplay session. No one's going to want to wait while a new player goes to look through these spells, which often does happen. So I've always got my recommended list, my very, very short list of the ones I say, I would start with these and check them out. So sleep. As a magic user, it's that nuke. It's the bomb that I was talking about earlier. And so sleep, there's no saving throw for that, where most other spells do allow it. And it's extreme, so it's very, very effective against like level 1 or 2 or lower, or it's really hit dice is how you refer to monsters. If they're 1 or 2 hit dice, but it's equivalent to levels in PCs. So for very low HD monsters, sleep is very effective. I think it's 4 to 16 of them it can affect. And then it goes up like 3 or 4, it's like 2 to 8. And then 1 to 4 creatures can be affected, and then only 1 to 2 creatures. So it very quickly gives you diminishing returns on the number of creatures it'll affect. So it's really, its sweet spot is those very, very the lowest levels, like 2 and under, which is great for a first level mage. It's very hard to argue any other spell against sleep. I've seen Magic-User players all but cry if they fail to learn sleep because their intelligence is too low, because they know that's my bread and butter at low level. So I would say number 1 choice, if you can get it, learn sleep, prepare it each day when you're going out, and save that in your holster for when your team really, really needs your intervention because things are not going their way. A couple of other respectable ones you can consider. Shocking Grasp is pretty good. Before I leave from sleep, when you do cast that, like I said, I told you about the numbers it affects, no saving throw, and it does what it sounds like. It puts them to sleep, so they just fall down, and I forget the duration on it, but it's going to basically outlast most any combat you're going to engage in at level 1. It's like 6 rounds or something, maybe more. So yeah, it's going to knock them out. And the good thing about that also is once they're unconscious like that, it's an automatic hit. So something I would recommend as a mage is if you put some creatures to sleep and there are not other baddies nearby, you can kind of sneak up, or this is good for thieves too, who can move around, and you don't even have to roll it to hit die. Just tell the DM, putting my blade into one of those adversaries who fell asleep. It's an automatic hit, an automatic kill. So once they're down, if you've got any players who are not engaged in combat any further, rather than hiding in the shadows, if you can, safely, start offing all of them, make sure they don't wake up. Because especially if they're fighting intelligent adversaries, even if they're low level, some can be slightly more intelligent. And if they're smart enough, the DM could roleplay them as trying to wake up the ones that didn't go to sleep and try to wake up and rouse their fallen or sleeping comrades. And they can be woken with a hard shake and screaming like, get the hell up. So you do want to consider that and off them as quickly as you can safely. All right, so now back to my other recommendations. Shocking Grasp was a pretty good one. The one caveat with this one is it's a grasp. The magic user has to have physical touch on their intended target. But once you do, it's like, 1 to 8 damage. I want to say that's per level. It does scale. I'm not exactly sure. I forget how, if it's 1 every 2 levels, something like that, but I think it might be 1 per level. So anyway, check it out. See what you think of yourself. That is another good one. Shield is another really good one. It essentially puts like a magical shield, a force barrier in front of the magic user. And there's 3 different factors, like physical attacks are received as if it was +2 armor class. Oh, I'm sorry, not +2. Just 2 armor class. Or you know what I can do here for you? Yeah, I think we're just going to go straight to the magic user spells. So I can make sure I'm giving you all good information on these. Sleep we covered pretty well, and I'm pretty certain on the info that I did give you. But let's just double check those numbers, because I kind of gave you estimates, and we can at least be accurate here. So yeah, up to level 1 is where you do the 4 to 16 adversaries. From 1 to 2, it does 2 to 8. And so up to 1, it's going to be like your kobolds and so forth, and goblins, and here you're getting into more difficult humanoids, where you're going to do 2 to 8 of them you can put to sleep. 2 to 3 levels or hit dice, you can only affect 1 to 4, and beyond that, you can see it tails off. So it's really let's say level 3 and below, can be quite effective. Great spell. Range on it scales with the level of the magic user, but even at first level, you've still got 4 inches there, which is good. The duration, yeah, like I said, it's around 6, but it starts out actually at 5 for level 1, but then it's up to 10 for level 2. So the duration jumps quickly. And the other thing I didn't mention, yeah, you can pop it off in one segment. And this is the most critical probably that I was saying to you, 0 saving throw. They just fall asleep. So yeah, very, very potent spell at very low levels. And then shield is here. Shield again, also very quick to pop off, lasts for 5 rounds per level. So level 1, it's only going to, be part of a combat or maybe one combat it's going to work for. But in a pinch, when a magic user needs, you can put a shield up. And it's going to give you armor class 2. Actually, that is against hurled missiles. See, I'm glad we checked. So I made a mistake. I think I said that was melee weapons. Armor class 2 against hurled weapons like axes and darts. Armor class 3 against propelled missiles, arrows and crossbow bolts and so forth. And armor class 4 against the melee attacks, or really it says all other forms of attack. It's also going to add to your saving throws. So it's a really good defensive spell or protective spell for a magic user in a pinch. And remember, you're only getting 1 spell per day at first level. So if this is the one you're using, it's only defensive, which means you're not going to be getting any action, and you're only popping that off when you're in dire straits. Save it for when, some creature is specifically targeting you and you don't have anywhere to get away or get a meat shield in front of you. You could pop that off, because you've only got 1 to 4 HP at a low level, unless your constitution gives you a couple of points and bonuses. So you don't want to take any hits. So it is an effective spell. But I think those would be like my top 3. Well, the other one I do need to mention, Magic Missile. Right? So this is probably one of, if not the most, Fireball Magic Missile, I would say, probably like the most popular magic user spells that like everybody's heard of, knows about, loves them. And I do love Magic Missile. I love it because how it scales is probably, it's like a critical or an essential piece of it. And scaling meaning as the magic user levels, at mid-range levels and up, it's fantastic. At first level, you only get 1 missile and it only does 2 to 5 hit points of damage, which is very low. So for your 1 spell per day, it is no comparison in my mind to a sleep spell. I would think probably not in most people's minds. And as you hit level 3 and higher, you start getting multiples of these, and that's when it's great. It is also very quick to pop off. And another great thing about it, it always hits. It's like a homing missile. It does not miss. So that's fantastic. I was trying to see where it says it always hits. I'm not seeing it, but trust me, it does. Oh, here we go. Unerringly strikes their target. And like I said, as you level up and you get multiple ones of these, great. And you can shoot at one target or multiple targets. You'll split up the missiles. I make my players announce, I imagine you're supposed to actually, because you got to announce spells and their intended targets and so forth prior to initiative rolls. So you can't wait to see, does the first missile kill them, and then I'm going to decide to send the other missiles at other creatures. No, you got to decide, at the very beginning, where are those missiles going to. But it is a great spell. I just like it more as you level up. I would not choose sleep for a level 1 magic user. When that magic user gets to level 4 or 5, yes, sleep's getting ineffective because it doesn't work so well against higher hit dice creatures, where this spell is fantastic against higher hit dice creatures because you're probably level 4 or 5 now, so you're getting more missiles. It always hits. It's doing pretty decent damage, so yeah, level 1, I would probably ignore Magic Missile, but you do want to make sure you get it into your spellbook if possible, because again, great spell. This is worth an honorable mention, Protection from Evil, but there's right a few in here that are, but so we're just going to stick with the ones I've given you so far. So let's go to the Illusionist spells. Level 1. What I'm looking for here. Illusionist level 1. All right, I really like color spray, but this is another one of those scales up as you level, so it's better at higher levels. Not really going to do a whole lot at first level. It can only affect one creature. I believe, because I think it's only like one per level of the illusionist. Let me read this again. You're only able to affect one level or hit die of creatures. So even if it's one creature that's 2 hit dice, you can't affect it because it's only one level of hit die. Right? So it's only going to work against one creature that's HD1 or lower. But as you level up and the scales for you, then it's better. So I do like this spell, but not level 1. And there's a few of them like that. But okay, so what is good here for first level illusionist? Hypnotism. Might not sound like a whole lot, right? Because we actually have hypnotism in real life, and what are you going to do with that? Have them eat a raw potato? But it is a quick. Well, most of these first level spells are going to be one segment to cast. But it's got decent range on it. And what it does is you can cause from 1 to 6 creatures to become susceptible to suggestion. And you got to read the Magic-User spell of suggestion for that. But essentially, you can make a suggestion that the adversary, 1 to 6 of them, are very susceptible to. So you can tell them, I'm your best friend and you don't want to fight me, or just walk away. You can't tell them, like, commit suicide with the suggestion, but you can certainly get them to disengage from combat or help you out. Give over treasure, perhaps. It's all going to be really ultimately up to how your DM adjudicates it. But to give you an idea of what you can and can't do, like, they're certainly not going to take a suggestion of suicide. But they will befriend you if you want to make that type of suggestion. Because it's 1 to 6 creatures, it can be effective. Again, at low levels, you really want to go for these mass effect spells. Magic missiles only hitting one target at first level, but a sleep spell affects a whole bunch. Same thing with hypnotism here. You want to be able to help your party significantly, and the best way you can do that is taking a bunch of creatures out of action when it's really needed. So this is one way to possibly do that. Phantasmal Force is probably the number 1, and you're going to want to keep that top of your list. And as you'll see, it's the same as I said earlier. I think I said to you earlier, there is crossover between the Illusionist and Magic-User spells. There's even crossover between Magic-User Illusionist and Cleric spells. It works that way. There's some that are the same. So it tells you for the description, we got to go back to the 3rd level Magic-User spell for Phantasmal Force. And I'm actually going to do that because it is such a potent, I got to level 3, potent and really different, unique spell. So I want to make sure I give you, I highlight the information properly. Then just for your information, here's that suggestion. So hypnotism said it allows you to give a suggestion spell to 1 to 6 creatures, so you can read that to get the details on it, but very effective spell, works similarly to how I told you. So the Phantasmal Force, great range on it, and it does scale. Area of effect, also very good, and it does scale. Takes a little longer to pop off, but it's still less than half a round. And this is such a tricky one for a DM to work with. Always has been. I've actually written on our AD&D Toolkit website, I've written a blog article about it. And as I said in our in the toolkit for the Dungeon Masters, so in their campaign manager, they've got a lot of tools to use for running their games, and one of them is for adjudicating and calculating the effects of illusion spells, particularly Phantasmal Force. And I honestly think it's fantastic because it standardizes the process so your players know what to expect. It makes the process universal from one DM to the next if they're all using the toolkit. And I put a lot of work into it. I would say the large majority of it is based upon Dragon Magazine articles with people like Metzer and Gygax had to say about illusions and Phantasmal Force and how they intended them to work. And I actually did get to speak, only through text, but with Mike Metzer on it a little bit to get his insights on what he thought and how he played it in his games. And then I just talked to a lot of other DMs that I respect the way they run their games and their grasp of first edition and even second edition. And then I just took all that together as, a large amalgam and made a module, a tool that manages Phantasmal Force. And I highly recommend you check that out in AD&D Toolkit, the web app, because it's a great way, like I said, to standardize, especially if you're new to the game. I would argue you need to check it out. And even if you do things differently afterwards, consider what's in there. And by reading a blog article about how that module works, the Illusions module that I wrote up, that I developed. So maybe even more important to just read the blog article, see what I used and how I used it, and then tailor it to your game. If you find value in it, I would hope you would. And as I said, most of it, the meat of it, comes from Dragon Magazine articles. So, we got a lot of help from them on that, from the authors. But when the spell is cast, and you'll note they say the magic user creates an illusion, right? Technically, I guess it's an illusionist, but they are a subclass of magic user. And they're creating a visual illusion, and this is important. Visual. So it's not going to have auditory sound. It's not going to have heat and temperature differences. You're not going to feel wind rushing by, tactile, stuff like that. And that is going to be part of what your DM should be adjudicating as to whether the illusion is effective at tricking your opponent or not. It's a big part of what I've built into the illusion module in Toolkit. And actually, I keep talking about it. I'm going to go there and show you the module, because it really is. There's a lot to talk about. It's a very difficult spell to adjudicate well, particularly if you're not an experienced DM. So here I can flip back and forth between these. So these are all the factors when you have a player casting a phantasmal force. You want to plug all this data in. And this is by far the longest module, the most fields I have. All my other modules are, 1 or 2 fields. They're a lot quicker to work with, but this is such a complex issue. I wanted to get a lot of information built into it. And this is partly what, again, in Dragon Magazine, they did push for too. For instance, the class of the spell, is it coming from an illusionist or a magic user or a thief reading an illusion scroll? Phantasmal force from a scroll, they can do that at higher levels. The illusionist should be more effective at creating an illusion than the other options. The intelligence of the viewer should play a big part of this. Really low intelligent creatures are going to have a harder time realizing it's a magical illusion as opposed to a highly intelligent one, and so forth. The level of the caster, the caster's intelligence, and so on. And I was just talking about senses, and that's what got me to think of this module. So you can see how many senses are missing, right? There's 5 senses: vision, hearing, tactile or touch, and so forth. So there's always going to be at least one. Phantasmal Force has visual. And so of the other 4, how many of them are missing? And so the reason I'm saying that is important is you want to judge an illusion. So like in this module that I've built here, there's 2 very important factors. There's the quality of the illusion, how good the illusion is, and that's what's dictated by the class of the caster, the level of the caster, the intelligence of the caster, and so forth. And then there's the counterpart to that, which is the ability of the viewer to detect it as an illusion, and that's going to be the intelligence of the viewer. And was there a friendly warning for the viewer? Someone who already detected it as an illusion and is yelling at them, don't worry, it's not a real dragon, it's a phantasmal force. It's going to be maybe hard to believe because you've got this dragon in front of you, but it is a piece of data. It's a data point you're going to take into account for, can they detect this as an illusion or not? So those are the 2 things: the ability of the viewer to detect an illusion and the quality of the illusion cast by the caster. And so phantasmal force only has a visual component to it. And so if the illusion is a brick wall, it doesn't move. It shouldn't really have a temperature difference. It's not going to have, it doesn't make any sound or anything. You just need the visual. So that's going to have a really good benefit to the quality of the illusion. Whereas if you tried to create an illusion of phantasmal force of a dragon breathing fire, that's going to be a tough one to pass on to somebody, because you can only do the visual. So they're not going to feel the heat. They're not going to feel the impact of the breath weapon. They're not going to hear the roaring of a dragon. So it's going to be a difficult one to pull off. Now, there is an improved phantasmal force, and it's improved because it starts accounting for some of these other senses. And that's why I said this is such an important, crucial word here that you do need to take into account. It's visual only. But still, you can do a lot of really creative things with it. You can put up an illusion of a wall piece where there's a section of a wall or a door between you and an adversary you want to avoid. Put up the illusion of a wall and they might go right past it. Or something else that's really cool, you can create a phantasmal force of an actual creature, right? And the creature you can have it attack. And if it does attack, the viewer, the opponent, the target of your spell, can actually take real damage from this creature because they believe in it, commensurate with the damage they would expect. So like if you create an illusion of an orc with a longsword, this adversary can take 1 to 8 hit points of damage from an illusion. Not really there, but their brain believes it is. And so it does real damage. And you can see, so the phantasm affects all believing creatures, even to the extent of suffering damage. So if you have phantasmal missiles being shot at them like arrows, they'll take 1 to 6 damage if they believe in it. Or falling into a pit, they'll take damage from the fall and the spikes if you have an illusion of spikes. So at low levels, this can be really effective. It's also really fun because you can be so creative. Like anything the player can think of to create an illusion of, give it a shot. And it's up to your DM to adjudicate it. And that's where I say for DMs, it can get crazy, because especially if you're not experienced, because you don't know what they're going to dream up. You don't know how to account for maybe their class level and intelligence, and should you or should you not. So this module I think is great, especially for those beginner DMs. I would definitely check this out, this module in AD&D Toolkit, and I would definitely read the blog article I have on the Illusions module, how it works, the rationale behind it. That can help you, particularly if you want to do your own version of how to handle illusions. Pick and pull some of my ideas if you like them. They go on from here. You need to note there's no audio property to the illusion. It will last until struck by an opponent. So if you create a wall to hide your existence behind it, right? Like I said, if there's an open archway and you want to hide from an enemy, if you put up an illusion of a wall, they won't see your party through the illusion. If they touch it, the illusion goes away, but they probably won't think to. They'll just walk right on by it. Whereas if you create a phantasm of a creature, they're likely to strike it, and once they do, it's gone. So it's only going to maybe do quick damage. All right, so it only lasts until struck by an opponent unless the spellcaster causes the illusion to react appropriately, which is very difficult to do, or until the magic user ceases concentration upon the spell. Creatures which disbelieve the phantasmal force, they're going to gain a saving throw. So that's important to keep in mind as a DM, and I did build saving throws into the Toolkit module. How did this target save versus spells in case they do detect it? We need to know if they're going to save or not, and Toolkit will give you the results of that too. Creatures who don't view it are immune to it until or unless they do. So if part of the group that you're trying to affect by this phantasm, say again that dragon, if someone is turned the other way and not looking at it, they're not affected by it, right? There's no audio quality or anything else to it other than the visual. So if they're not looking, they're not susceptible to it. And you can come up with an illusion of any object, creature, or even a force, as long as it's within the boundaries of the spell's area of effect. And it can, within the range. So really creative spell can be very powerful, very difficult for DMs to work with if they're new to it. But that's definitely my top choice. Like I said, hypnotism is a good one to consider too. All right, so preparing spells. I'm going to switch over to the DMG for this. All right, so actually before I go into preparing spells, I'm going to get to starting spells. So both the Illusionist and the Magic User have a set number of spells they start with. You're supposed to have just finished like a mentorship or an apprenticeship with a higher level Magic User. And so you're starting out level 1, and they've granted you this magical tome, which is going to be your lifetime magical spellbook. You can only cast spells that you have within your spellbook, with the rare exception of like scrolls that you may find, and that is rare, and also they disappear. Once you cast a spell from a scroll, it's gone. So if a scroll has 3 spells on it, once you cast all 3, scroll's empty. So really, it's your spellbook. You need to protect your spellbook. The only thing you got to protect more than your spellbook is yourself. You need to keep your spellbook. I would say, as harsh as it may sound, your spellbook is more important than your compatriots in your party. You are useless without your spellbook. Do not lose it. All right, so your mentor or your teacher is going to give you your first spellbook. So you're going to start the game with it. And within that spellbook, magic users start with 4 spells. Generally, you can opt for 1 less or a couple more if you have a difficult campaign. But DMG says 4, 3 for an illusionist. Now, the 4th one of the 4 for the magic user is always going to be read magic. Magic users need a read magic spell in order to read magic user spells off of scrolls and other spell books. So it's, rationalized that in order to have been a help to your mentor, you need to be able to read magic. So that's a given. And then the other 3, it says you should choose 1 from the offensive list, 1 from the defensive list, and 1 from the miscellaneous. And these add up to 27 of the 30, and the 30th say you can choose. So what you're supposed to do is like roll the 10-sided die, and then that's the first level spell you get. So you roll a 10-sided die. If it's 7, you get push as one of your second of your 4, right? The first one would be read magic. Second would be push. Roll the 10-sided die here and say you get spider climb, which is at 8. And let's say for your miscellaneous, you roll 10. You can choose from this list what you want. I don't like doing that, right? Your mages, your magic users are so limited in so many other ways. I just let them pick 3 other spells. I don't even make them pick one of each of the 3 columns. I just tell them any of the 30 first level spells, you can pick 3 more after read magic. Each DM, of course, is going to do this differently. There's going to be plenty that play by the book, but that's a variation that I do. And don't forget that intelligence ability. They may say, yeah, I want to try to learn Magic Missile. Okay, roll the percentile dice. If you fail, that counts as your second of your 4, even though you failed it, in my way of doing this. What you're, I think, supposed to do, again, is roll for all 30, go through the whole first level list, and see which ones you actually can learn. And once you've done that, then you roll the dice and pick these. So you're going to actually have 4. If you do it by the book, you will have 4 in your spellbook. Read magic and 3 others. If you're doing it my way, you might start with less. You're going to get read magic, of course, by default, but then you get to pick 3 more, and I make you roll percentile dice, like I said, as you try to accrue a new spell. So there's benefits and penalties to, my way versus the book way. You probably are best starting out the book way, if you're a new DM. Right. And so those are your starting spells. Illusionists do similarly, but they have less spells. And like I said, they're not going to use read magic early on. They get 3 as opposed to the magic user who has 4. Both of them will get new spells, as I talked about earlier, as they find scrolls, or God forbid they come across someone else's spell book. Fantastic. All right, the next 5 to 10 seconds are going to be a spoiler for players, so I would suggest only DMGs should, only Dungeon Masters should listen to this. And so here we go for the next 5 to 10 seconds. It reads down here. Players, PC magic users can share spells with other PCs. You should not stop them from doing that, but don't recommend it either. Let them figure it out. All right, that's my spoiler done. So you don't need to plug your ears any longer. We're going to go on to non-spoiler information from this point forward again. But yeah, the spoiler part there was, I really probably should have started before I even got into showing you the DMG here. It's recommended by the authors, and I highly recommend to my players too. Don't read the Dungeon Master's Guide. I tell a lot of them, don't even really read the Monster Manual. Leave that mystery in the game. Let your Dungeon Master learn all of that stuff, all of the crunchiness and all of the data points, and reading what are the stats of monsters and how do things work within this world, and you just roll with it. Let your DM tell you what you can and can't do. Try everything, and if it fails or the DM says it won't work, then okay, that doesn't work, but don't take the mystery out of the game. It's a role-playing game at its heart. And so I don't like spoiling it for the players, and I recommend don't read the DMG in particular, maybe even the Monster Manual too. I know, especially that Monster Manual, it's very enticing. As a kid, it was I wanted to read it all. I've always been a DM, so it's not a problem for me. But, it's got awesome stuff, and you want to just go through it all. It's good artwork, but it does take away from some of the magic and mystery of the game. So if you know you're going to be a player, or at least mostly a player, try to avoid those books for a while. All right, so back to it. That's how these guys get their future spells. They do, of course, I'm going to keep reminding you, roll for intelligence to see if you can learn it or not. And keep track of the ones you fail, because again, you can't try them again. Of course, you'll be keeping track of the spells that you do put into your spell book. All right, so preparing spells, I think that's on this page. So they call it recovery of spells. I usually call it preparing spells. And so clerics and druids, they get their spells from their deities. They pray, is the term we use. Magic users and illusionists have spell books, and they prepare or memorize their spells. The mechanics are very similar, if not the same. But, they're not the same. There are some differences. But as far as recovery, they're the same. So how this works is all of those classes, they need rest first. Okay, and so what you need to figure out is what's the highest level. Let's say my party is camping for the night. Okay? And the characters are saying they want to learn new spells for the next day, the casters. My question is going to be, what's the highest level spell you're looking to prepare tonight? You need to know that first. If the highest level spell is 1 or 2, they need 4 hours of rest. If the highest level spell is 5 or 6, they need 8 hours of rest. So even if they say, look, I got to learn, let's say it's a higher level party here. I got to learn 4 level 1 spells tonight, but there's 1 5th level spell I definitely want to get in there. Okay, 8 hours. The highest level spell they're preparing is the one that dictates how many hours of rest is needed. Okay? And that rest, it says up here somewhere, it's got to be sleep. Yeah, usually sleep. Now, the reason I'm finding that, because the usually is important. So I tell my players, it's got to be complete rest. Usually that means sleep. But let's say they're in an inn and they go to their bedroom in the middle of the day. Let's say they cast their spell early in the morning, like a detect magic when they woke up. And so by 8 o'clock in the morning, they've cast a spell. And they say, okay, we're going to get going later this afternoon to leave town. I want to just rest. It only takes me 4 hours. It's a low-level party. I want to get my first-level spell back. But can I just sleep in the middle of the day for 4 hours? Probably not, right? If you just go lay down in your bed, do nothing else, just hang out and rest for 4 hours, you don't technically sleep, I let that count as 4 hours. It's up to your DM if they do or not. Because in the other areas here of where they talk about this rest, they do say sleep. They don't say usually. But that is a key point. And there's a lot of nuance like that in first edition, mostly in the DMG, but in some of the other manuals too, where a single word like this really does change the way DMs interpret what was intended, because a lot of stuff is not clear, particularly in first edition D&D, and experienced DMs will argue this one word, both sides of the argument, for years, and to great lengths. But to me, it means they don't always have to technically be unconscious to get that rest. All right, so once you know how much rest they need, after the rest, not before, but after the rest, you're going to calculate 1/4 of an hour or 15 minutes per level of spell that must be spent in studying or praying or meditation. Okay? So this same magic user from before, studying, preparing, 4 first-level spells, 1 fifth-level, they're going to need, so a first-level spell takes 15 minutes. They want 4 of them. That's an hour. 5th-level spell, that's an hour and 15 minutes. So they need an hour here, an hour and 15 there. So that's 4 hours of rest, and then 2 hours of 15 minutes after their rest to prepare those spells. That's how you calculate that. And I don't vary from that. I would argue most DMs do not. You want to enforce that. I have seen some videos. Actually, I just saw one yesterday. Somebody argued against this. He was, I believe, 5th edition. Started with 5th edition. I think he talked about this in his video. And then moved over to 1st edition. He's played a bunch of the editions. And so he wanted to bring this into 1st. I would recommend do not. There's a reason for this. It's part of the game balance as far as game balancing goes in 1st edition. But stick to this, especially if you're a new DM. All right, so that's preparing new spells. And again, that's whether you're a cleric, druid, magic user, or illusionist. They all need the same amount of time calculation. It's just, are you getting your spells from your spellbook, or are you praying for them? But the magic user and the illusionist, both doing them the same way. They're getting some quiet time and memorizing these spells from their spellbook. Once the spell goes into their head, they've spent the amount of preparation time required. So let's say this same magic user, he's got 5 spells in his head for the day. Once let's say these 4 first level spells were 2 of them magic missile and 2 sleep, because you can double up like that. Once you cast one of those magic missiles, they're gone for the day. You're now down to 4 spells. Once you cast the next magic missile, you're down to 3 spells. And they evaporate out of your memory like that until you again can get 4 hours of rest, or 8 hours in this case, and start preparing new spells. Now, I don't think it says anywhere in any manual that if you don't cast those spells and you sleep that night, do you need to memorize them again or not? I've never seen anything expressly address that. But I say no, you don't need to. Once they're in there, they stay in there until you cast them. And a lot of DMs I know do similarly. All right, so from here, the other thing I did want to point out was, so back to the player's handbook, for each spell there are components required. And that's the VSM that you're going to see here. And some spells only have a VM component, some are VS. What they stand for is a verbal, somatic, and material components. So what this means is when you cast this spell, there's a verbal component, so you need to utter magical words. There's a somatic component, so you need to move your body in a certain way, usually your hands. And there's a material component, so you're going to need items accessible to you to cast the spell. maybe like a axe-beak feather, or a piece of lint, or a little pinch of dirt. All right, so most, I would say, magic user spells have material components to them. But you do want to know this for each spell. And where it becomes really important is, let's say you have a spell, well, all of these have they all have verbal components. But this one's only verbal. I'm wondering now, I've never actually looked. I don't know if they all, at a minimum, have a verbal component. But, so the reason for this is, let's say a silence spell, or somehow silence, like underwater. If there's a verbal component to a spell, you can't cast it if you're silenced by a cleric, an opposing cleric or an opposing magic user. If there's a somatic component, you can't cast it if your hands are tied. So for instance, tongues you could cast with your hands tied, but that's probably fairly rare. Most spells, I think, do have a somatic component. And same for the materials. If a magic user was to be stripped of all of his components, see, he keeps them all in pouches on his belt, and some enemy had taken them all, figuring, all right, can't cast any spells without this. Well, yeah, he could cast a charm monster, even without his little bags of materials there. And a dumb creature might not know that. So that's where these components do come into play. You do want to be aware of them, particularly as a DM. And something else to keep in mind as far as the material components. So I know in the DMG they talk about this somewhere, and I don't recall where it is, but I'm confident it's in there, that if a player needs to rummage through like a sack or a backpack, you have to say 5 segments, which is half of a round, right? 30 seconds. You got to say it takes 30 seconds to rummage through a backpack or a sack and find what you're looking for, whatever it is. I actually say it's a minute, a full round in my games, because I think it would take longer. With a backpack, you're going to have a lot of junk in there when you're out on an adventure, and to find a particular thing is going to take some time. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that strongly encourages my magic users and illusionists to buy themselves a belt and a few little belt pouches to hang on those belts, or maybe a cloak that are going to have some pockets in it, things like that. Because you want to be able, especially for low-level spells, if your spells only take 3, 2, or 1 segments, you don't want to waste a round finding the materials. Now, this spell that should go off in 3 segments is going to take you 8, if you go by the book, 5 segments to find it and 3 more to cast it. Or the way I do it, a full round to find the material components you need. And then in the next round, you can actually pop it off in 3 segments. So it encourages my players to wear cloaks and belts and belt pouches, which is going to, a little bit of cost, which might be something to consider for a low-level character, but really as they get higher level, doesn't matter. Because they're going to have coin laying around, and that stuff is cheap. But it will add to weight encumbrance, and I strongly suggest you account for encumbrance in your games. I know it's very difficult to do when you're doing it all pencil and paper. And believe it or not, that's the first reason I actually came up with. And let me go to one of my campaigns here. But that's the first reason I developed AD&D Toolkit 4. I had a family campaign going on that we played in person. And we wanted to use really crunchy encumbrance rules. We wanted to account for everything our players were carrying, including food and water and weapons and armor and candles and torches and all that stuff. Account for the weight every time they pick something up and drop it. And that's really going to dictate your movement rate, and it's really going to dictate what you choose to carry and leave behind. It's also going to, really impact what kind of weapons you're going to use. Because if you're not factoring in weight, use the two-handed sword. It does huge damage, right? But if you realize, wow, that's 25 encumbrance value versus, I'm going to guess here, 6 or 7 for a typical sword, right? It's a third of the weight for a smaller sword. you're really going to think about that two-handed sword now. So it adds so much depth to the game when you're accounting for encumbrance and then the speed that goes with it, the movement speed of the party and the individual player. But it's so hard to do by the book because you've got, every time they pick something up or drop something, you've got to change the encumbrance values and then the movement values may be there. A lot of calculating, it's so much downtime. Most DMs don't do it. So I built it into Toolkit. It does it all automatically. The players have to add and remove items from their backpack here, as you see, but it's very simple to do. And once you do that, their encumbrance, this is their max based upon their strength and so forth. And then the movement also, all of this is automatically calculated. Like here, encumbrance currently is 39.05. Once I add a single ration, let's go to an iron ration here. I'm going to add one of them to this character. When I go back to Hab, instead of 39.05, he's now 39.4. It went up because of the weight, the encumbrance value of that ration. And so if I add enough of them, the movement's going to go down. It's going to change here. So Toolkit is a lot. Yeah, I'm really plugging Toolkit here, but this was a good reason for it. What I was talking about with the Magic-Users and Illusionists, they got to put on a cloak now, and a backpack, and a few pouches, and a belt. It's going to add to their weight or their encumbrance. It might be enough to actually impact their movement. They got to counter that with, well, do I just want to carry a large sack, which is going to be a lot lighter, but now it's going to take time for me to find the components I need when I got to cast some of my spells. So do I really want to do that, or should I just buy a bunch of pouches to hang on my belt and a cloak? You know, I have a bunch of different places. In the movies and stories, wizards of old had all these different pockets and pouches they were grabbing from for the materials they needed. And I want to replicate that. This is a way to do that. Toolkit allows you to encourage that. So it's one of the many, many reasons I love Toolkit. All right, enough of a plug. Actually, I think, no, we're going to be plugging Toolkit a little bit more. Because really where I wanted to go from here is showing you how you can manage some of the stuff that we've just talked about that you would normally do on paper, how I think it's so much more fun, easier to do in Toolkit. So the first thing is, for every mage and illusionist, it's going to give you the spells per day. That big table that we had seen in the player's handbook, now it's reduced to one row based upon the level of this character. As this character's level goes up, these numbers change. So Toolkit does a lot of that, automatically calculating, so you can take an entire table out, and you only need the row specific to the level of your character. So a 6th level magic user can cast 4 first level spells, 2 second level, 2 third level. Okay, that information is right here at your fingertips, easy for you to keep account of. Now you also have your spellbook you can access in Toolkit for your magic user, or you can go to memorizing, which is preparing your spells for the day. We're going to start with your spellbook. That's where your life would start. Okay, and so this guy, Hab, I use him a lot. He's a testing character of my own, and I use him for a lot of videos I do. So he's got some spells here already, right? So these are the spells that are within his spellbook, which are not typical for a 6th level mage. You would have a lot more spells, but just bear with me, okay? These are the spells in your spellbook. This is the entirety of the Magic-User spell list for 1st edition. And good point to note, AD&D Toolkit does support 2nd edition and Unearthed Arcana, and depending on the system, one of those 3, that your DM is using, these spells will change, right? Because there's spells in 2E that are not in 1E. So if this character was playing a 2E campaign, this spell list would be different. Very similar, because they are similar between the 2 editions, but there are differences. Okay, so these are all 30 of the 1st level spells, minus the ones I've learned, which are up here for 1st level. That's why you see it's not truly 30. It's 30 minus the ones in his spellbook, and minus any spells he has failed, which there are 4 down here, 1st level spells he's failed to learn. So that's that intelligence number, right? The percentage chance to learn or know a new spell. So this character has failed based on his intelligence to learn these spells, And Toolkit keeps track of them over your character's lifetime, so that I know I can never attempt to learn Find Familiar again. Unless my intelligence was to increase, right? There are usually caveats. But for the most part, I'm never going to be trying to learn Find Familiar again. So not only is it listed down here, but again, it's removed from the ones that I can try to put into my spellbook. So if I somehow forget I failed on Find Familiar at one point, and say, hey, I want to try to learn it, it's not even here for me to try to learn. I'm going to say, oh yeah, I think I failed that one. And you scroll down. So it's helpful. It's more helpful than paper. And it's just fun to play with. And it's all accessible. It's all here for you. And your dungeon master has access to this page. So they also can double check if they don't want to embarrass you, right? Or whatever. If they just want to quietly check, didn't he fail Find Familiar at one point? They can secretly take a look at this and then mention it to you on the side, or just say, did you fail Find Familiar at some point? I feel like you did. Check your sheet. Or they could just be upfront and say, I looked at your sheet. I think you're forgetting you failed Find Familiar. So yeah, I just love, I'm plugging Toolkit. I love Toolkit. It's great. I would never play AD&D without it again. But all right, so it tracks everything here. And the way you do this is, let's say you come across a scroll as a magic user, it has effect normal fires on it, and you want to try and learn it. So you roll your percentile dice and woohoo, you can learn it. All right, your intelligence was high enough. You're going to click the green plus button, and that's going to add it into your spellbook. And forevermore, your character will now have effect normal fires here. And it should stay here, and it's never going to go away. Always in your spellbook, unless you lose your spellbook, right? That's the suck. Don't do it. If you did, you're going to click the X here on all these spells because you're going to lose them and you're going to have to get a new spellbook. Or let's say you just made a mistake, right? You actually told your DM you wanted to learn Burning Hands because that's what's on the scroll. So you clicked the wrong button here. Just click the X. You can get rid of it. Okay? Otherwise, these spells, they're going to stay here for a lifetime. So don't go accidentally clicking these X's. If you do, you can always put it back, but keep track. All right, so let's say you got your effect normal fires from a scroll. On the same scroll, it does have Charm Person. And you want to try that. You roll your percentile dice. Oh my god, it's a 92. You failed. You cannot learn Charm Person. You click the red X. And that is how you pop it into your failed to learn spells. God forbid. All right, so that's how you manage that. Now, there's something else very cool in Toolkit. And it's newer, so it's only in like one of my other previous videos. I did a video specifically on this, and this is spell data. So it took a lot of time, had to build up the database, but I've got it in here now that you see these little scroll icons. On a PC, you hover over them. On a mobile device like an iPad, you would need to tap on it. But when you do, looking for Magic Missile, because I love Magic Missile. You hover over it, it gives you the range, duration, area of effect, all that stuff, all that good stuff from the player's handbook. It's all here at your fingertips in Toolkit. You don't need to go flipping through pages every time and figure things out. What I recommend when you're playing a game, like I said, you've got to announce a spell before initiative is even rolled. I said that earlier in this video. So what I tell my players is don't wait till it's your turn to figure out what you're going to do. When it's not your turn, that's when you figure out what you're going to do. So when it is your turn, boom, you're ready to go. You're not holding up the game. Speeds up combat, makes everybody happy, including the DM. So you've got this information here as a magic user. Look at it. Figure out the range available to you. Something else really cool is anything that scales. There's a lot of things like range and duration and area of effect that scale as your character levels. Toolkit figures that out for you. So that's why on the Magic Missile, you're going to see the range here is 12 inches, right? That's the top row. I'm going to quickly go back to Hab. And if I change him now, his experience, make him level 1, and then go back to my spell book, Magic Missile for him, the range is only 7 inches, right? So it scales as you level. Toolkit does it for you. It does it for all of those fields. The only thing it does not do is see the bottom row there, the notes, which are great, right? Damage 1d4 plus 1 per missile. You get an additional missile every 2 levels, and so forth. That's custom. The notes field is customized. And the way you do it is you click on any of these spells. All right, so I'm going to click on Magic Missile. And here's the spell notes. All right, it tells you the name, which you cannot change. But the notes you can. So whatever information is relevant to you for this spell, you type in there. Once you click submit, it's there. Okay, so for instance, Burning Hands, it's got NA, not available or not applicable for notes. I click on Burning Hands and say, this burns crap. Right, there's my notes. Go back to the little icon, and there it is, bottom row, burns crap. So now those notes are saved in our database, and it's per your account. So on any other Magic user that you play, Burns Crap is going to be in the notes for Burning Hands. It's a library that's universal. So you only have to do it once, and like I said, whatever is important to you is what you're going to put into that notes field for that spell. And once you do it, it'll apply to all of your characters. So very useful, very helpful, and you've got it all right here. You don't got to go flipping through the pages of the books or PDFs online, which stinks even harder like I do through my videos. It's all right here, and I love that feature of Toolkit. So again, definitely check it out. All right, so the other thing I want to show you about Magic Users and Illusionists here for spells is memorizing. This is how you prepare your spells for the day. And so, last time I played Hab through a tutorial video, he was level 6, or higher at least, so he did have other spells here. But what this page does, remember, this is preparing spells. So now we're not going to give the player access to the full list of spells. We're only giving him access to his spellbook. Remember, I did just add affect normal fires to Hab, so it's here. And so after my 4 hours of rest, if I'm level 1 and I want to memorize a new spell, I can pick any one of these. And to do that, I click the green button. It'll pop up here in my prepared spells. Once I cast a spell, I click the red X, and it's gone for the day. It stays here. This is my spellbook, but it's no longer in my prepared spells. So a level 1 character, right, he would not have all these spells. So you would get rid of them. And let's say it's a new morning, I slept all night. What spell am I going to pick for the day? I'm going to pick sleep. I'm level 1. That's all I get. So that's my day. I go about my adventure. And here, when I want to cast the spell, click the red X. Gone for my memory. I've got nothing else prepared for the day. I need more rest. Helps keep track of your spells that are prepared and cast and so forth. So I work similarly for the Illusionist. But I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to discuss for you regarding Magic Users and Illusionists. I hope this should be very helpful for anybody who's new to first edition AD&D. It did give you a little bit of a look into Toolkit and how it can really help you out. Mostly we addressed, just a few issues for Magic users, but it did talk about encumbrance and movement and inventory and how that works for any class. But really great tool. Hope you do check that out too. And I hope to see you at our next video.